Hi everybody, welcome back to Flames Pyro Art for Beginners. We're going to make a start on the Three Skulls project. It's been a little time in the making, but we've had a few family health issues with a family member to deal with, so I've had to take a week or two off. But I thought we would make a start today on some of the skulls and look at some of the basic shading techniques. So we'll start, I'm going to work on all three skulls at the same time so I can just have fresh eyes on each different skull. So first of all, we're going to have a look at the middle one, which is this skull here, which is a full frontal shot. So we'll have a little look and make a start at this today. I'm using the medium space shader. And I've got my heat setting at about 2.5 at the minute. My pen's heated up. And what I'm looking to do to start with is on the inside of my graphite lines. Just put a base layer of shading down. I don't want to go too heavy at this point. This is just trying to define the edges in my mind. And I'm certainly not thinking really heavily about depth and shape at this point. It's just sort of like blocking in some of the back of the skull. As we'd see, let's take the black and white picture of this skull. There are a few layers to it. We've got the eye sockets, which are sat more forward than these side parts of the skull, so we do have to take that into account when we start doing the shading. Obviously, for things to look like further back from the eye, they need to be darker than the things sat nearer to the eye, if that makes sense. The darker you put things, the further it pushes it back. The lighter neighbour will look further forward. I find a medium space shader is a good tool for doing this sort of work, because you can get tight to the edges that you want to work up to. And so when we're doing the graphite transfers, they're just guidelines for, you know, your art creations. They don't have to be followed exactly to the letter of, say, this image. You know, you can use your own artistic imagination. It just helps you to set out maybe a neat skull. That, I mean, I personally couldn't draw that neat a skull freehand, so it just helps us to get the shape. On the early stages of any portrait or any piece of art that you're going to make with pyrography, it's all about feeling the piece out and trying to see it in your mind's eye of what you're trying to create. So the first few hours for me personally usually are just tentatively touching down start to build a mental image of what I want to achieve. With the human skull, there are many different like shades and depths of value, should we call them, but that's just another term for like the heat that we apply to the wood that can capture amazing different looks. And so already at the back of the skull there, that's going to be coming forward, isn't it, into the light. You know, there's going to be a dome. It's not going to be a flat object, is it? There's its very furthest point as far as the eye can see, and it's then going to come forward and round to the skull front here. And then on these images that I'd downloaded, we've got some cracks in the skull which we may put in, we may not, we'll see. Another thing you will find through my lessons or tutorials or whatever you want to class them as is I'm a big believer in moving your wood. If you want to create a burn stroke in a certain direction and create a shape in a certain flow, you need to burn in the direction of the shape you're trying to achieve. So you do need to, let's say here, I'm going to be behind the eye socket. What I personally would do is I would turn my board over, and so I can then get at that area easily, you know, without being all cack-handed and can't quite get my hand in the right place, and the heat bleeds coming into this eye socket, and it's all sort of spreading out onto the wrong side, which I don't want to happen. I want any heat that's excess to be on the darker side, so always come at it from the darker side. And this is just, at the moment we're still just looking where all the ridges are going to be, all the darkening is going to come within time. Set yourself off by looking at what you've got on your wood. Don't overcommit to anything. Pyrography is very much like any other art medium, a test of patience as much as anything. There are some great pyrographers that can whiz through this sort of thing. But I like to take my time. So already, I mean, we can see by the burn stroke I've put in here, for example, you can already start seeing that it looks like there's a step, you know, as you get tight up behind this front piece of the eye socket. You're now defining that there's something set lower than that front bone. But all values will all change as you work your way through the piece. I mean, these aren't the most exotic skulls that we could have picked. We could have picked far more adventurous skulls than this, but for some good basic shading techniques, these are really good starter. A lot of people may have trouble working upside down. I know it can throw you off. You know what you're doing. But you will get used to working with your board upside down as time progresses with your pyrography journey. Here's another area where the skull is set back from the main eye sockets on the front. So again, we're just blocking in, setting a depth. For anybody watching this video, it is the day of the European Championships football final. So we're wishing the best of luck to England tonight at Wembley, the European Championships final. We've not had a lot of success in the past of reaching major tournament finals, so it's going to be a good evening tonight. So hopefully we'll look back in history of this video and hopefully there'll be an England win. Now already we can start seeing just on my black and white image there is a slight variance there of colour, which is the shape of this skull beginning already to want to start showing itself to us. Because a good thing with skull art as well is you don't have to burn the whole of the skull, you know, you don't have to put heat into the whole piece. Sometimes less can be more. At this early stage we're working on the farthest point back. We're not looking to start on the highest, nearest point. I'm starting from the furthest point and I'm working my way upwards. Another thing you will have to consider when you're creating art like this is where is your light coming from. With this piece, I'm going to have it face on, the light is coming straight at the face of this. I'm not having it shining in from any direction, it's just hitting it full in the face. And when you put your graphite lines down, and if they're a bit wonky like mine was there, you can take them out quite easily with the graphite transfer paper. So at the top of the skull, at the very top, it's like, say, the horizon, you know, with the furthest point, you can see that is going to be its darkest point on the top, you know, to show it's set back, and it will gradually come out into the light. So quite early on we'll be able to remove the graphite from the top of the skull. This is all just about blocking in a minute. I always work on crazy angles, so I do apologise when my wood seems on a weird angle. I don't know, when I do handwriting as well, I have to handwrite with the paper on an angle. We can now remove that graphite from the top. It's been sat there for a week or so, it's rubbed out relatively easy. There's a little bit left. We'll capture that later on when we give us a final rub over and clean. It's the same down the sides, just blocking it in. really looking to create any variation in the shading that we're putting down at the moment. Just follow that edge round. Keep your pen on the inside of the skull, because that said any excess heat that does come from the flat bed of the spear pointer will be inside the piece of art you're working on rather than outside of it. So there are different little things, little tricks to think about when you're creating pyrography, is where to have your pen sat when creating a piece of art. And keep your pen on the inside of the artwork as much as possible when you're creating something like this. Because we haven't put any real dark heat into anything yet, we've not committed ourselves to nothing. There's going to be a lot of areas where we will leave unburnt on the skulls, but down here is going to, if you think about how the skull's going to wrap round, it's going to curl in and round, isn't it? So remember, I'm keeping that pen on the inside of what I'm working on, and if you need to move that board so you can get at it with the tip, so you've got full control. This is an early piece of shaping. As we go to this darkest point, as it goes under this eye socket, we want it to show dark, and then it slowly coming out and bursts into the light, and that will give you the illusion then of more depth. Now here is another little point I have to think about quite early. This little piece here is not anything to do with this part of the skull that is coming round. So we have to have variances in shading. This is just like basic shading. But if we think about it, if we did them at the same depth of shading, you know, the same colour, same heat applied, it would all look as if it's on the same level. So already now, at this point, we know that this area has to be darker than this area, which has to be darker than this area. So there's sort of 3 tones there, there's 3 values. I'm not going to overcommit myself to the middle level there. But now I am starting to think about how the sides of this skull are going to, you know, move up and shape and curl round. And because they're not massive skulls, they're not going to be huge dark patches. They're going to be quite thin bands. I know from the crack that's coming down the skull there, this is like sort of part of the side, isn't it? And then we're moving up onto the top, so we can show that we're bending down. And moving a pen stroke in that direction. And remember, the outside edge is going to be like sort of the furthest point back, and then it's going to gently blend its way out into more light. But now my mind is already starting to consider that this piece of the skull is going to be shaped over. So I'm going to start moving my burn strokes in a sort of flicking up in, you know, with a shape. Still keeping my pen inside the skull. Working from the darkest point first. Touching down, you know, in the darkest area. from the point now where I need to turn the board again, because the skull is wrapping itself round under this eye socket, but right here under this front bone is going to be the darkest point, as there's no light getting in. Right behind there would be no light, so it would be coming from total darkness, gradually making its way out towards light. I mean, you can come at it from this way if you use the tip. If you touch down 3/4 flat, you will get heat bleed into the area you don't want. So I say, for beginners, stuff, just move your board. It's so much easier. I prefer to move my board. Going to rub out more graphite in a minute. Got a knot here in the wood, but we can incorporate it as just a dint, or you could even have it as a bullet hole in the skull, anything. There's always things you can do with imperfections. Again, here is the dark behind the eye socket. There's going to be some great opportunities for us to experiment and explore so many things with these skulls, from these basic shading techniques where we're looking at different layers to add the depth, the steps of height, to we'll get to some more advanced pyrography as we journey. I'm going to have to turn my board again so I can stay within the skull. And you'll think you've gone quite dark, but once you remove that graphite, you will find you're actually a lot lighter than what you think you are. So we've got a squeaky desk. we did want to put that crack in, we'll just put a mark there. Look at the other crack. There, but we can use another pen to make that job easier. Use nearly all tip here. There's a tight area. I don't want any heat bleed going anywhere. Sometimes if you lift off for a second with your pen, you rebuild the heat in it. And the faster you move it, and the gentler you can have a lighter stroke. Let's see how long we've been running for, 30 minutes. Hopefully you're already beginning to see, you know, some shapes, some of the different levels beginning to emerge. We're still very early in this journey. If you've got really tight areas like this and you don't feel confident with your medium space shader, there is an extra small space shader that can get you into them super tight gaps. Where to know right down in there is going to be the darkest recess, but it's nothing to do with this side chunk here. And then I suppose we can have a little quick look at the inside of the eye sockets. To begin with, just blocking. Don't go right to the edge. Stay a little bit inside. But if you think about in the eyes, that is going to be one of the darker areas, isn't it? Because that's inside the skull. I know on these pictures they've put these lines in. I don't know if it's to signify cracks in the skull on the back, I don't know. But we'll decide what we're doing with them. I'm touching down with a little bit more of my pen at the minute because I can feel a bigger area in of heat. So I know this is going to go much darker. And there's one other little thing I will point out at this point. You can see here on the picture at the tops of the inside of the skulls, there's a darker value. That's because if you think about it, up here inside the skull there would be no light at all. So its darkest points would be up here on the back, you know, inside of the skull. And as everything darkens up with time, we can push the back of the skull right back. I love creating pyrographies of skulls, but in Gothic artwork, as my wife says, and I know it's not everybody's cup of tea is skulls and Gothic themed art. So I couldn't just sit there burning skulls all the time. I would have loved to, because it's the sort of art I like, but I had to broaden my horizons further than just skulls. This is still just blocking in. There's a few other great things I can tell you about with the skulls here. If you feel on your own head, You know where your eyebrow is? You feel like it is raised out. So let's see, taking a colour photo, for example. That's not the greatest of detailed skulls, but you see how it's lighter and darker because there is a raised brow, if you like. You know, here this is raised up, and then everything else just starts falling back. Now another thing as well I point out at this juncture is you may see parts of, you know, a skull is like thick, you know, a couple of millimeters or whatever thick. You may see parts of the thickness of the skull in the eye socket. You may see glimpses of the thickness. So I've intentionally left myself a little bit further inside there so I can have a look later down the line and see if I want to leave like any ridges that you would see, you know, with the thickness of the skull. That's why I've not gone right to the edge. I'd say maybe out of the three, I don't know which one will be the hardest one, maybe this one to get the shape. This is all about tears. When I say tears, T-I-E-R-S, layers. No, the kind of tears. You know, there's not as much shape in this, or it's all just about levels. We'll touch briefly while we've got a few minutes left in this video about the nose. Just to start it, the nose socket always has this bone rim, and then here there's a piece of bone that goes off inside the skull. On the inside edges of this bone, the side walls where it's going to be dark. Move your board round. Don't go right up to the edge yet, you know. Give yourself that opportunity to maybe see something down the line. Always leave myself a little tiny bit of wiggle room. And then here on this skull is where it cracks across, and then the other inside of the nose socket thing. And also, this is the thickness I was on about on the eye sockets. This is the thickness, you know, of the actual bone. So you'll always see that on frontal images of the skull. You'll always have that like parallel lines where it's the thickness of the skull. And we know that inside here, up at the top, there's not going to be much light up there. So it's another opportunity already now to start showing more depth. So much fun to work on the skulls. I did one for my brother. I called it Lost Souls of the Damned, and I got really carried away and I put a skull with loads of skulls on the skull, and that was a challenge. I was quite early in my pyrography journey. I decided to experiment with this really ambitious Lost Souls of the Damned skull. But no pyrography is ever a failure. You know, it's always learning. You know, everybody has to start from the same point. Everybody, you know, we all start from total beginner. And as a passion grows for pyrography, if you find it something that you really enjoy, so will your skill level start to increase. But if it can help to set you off on the right footing with your pyrography, it will save you a lot of time. So one of the key skills is, one of the key points is, don't have that heat too high. A lot of new pyrographers will make the mistake of wanting to rush and see the end result like within half an hour. You know, this skull, I want it done, I want it looking amazing in half an hour. It's not going to happen. Turn the heat down to the level where you can control what is going into the wood. Be patient and you will achieve magical things. Always push yourself, reach for the stars. See how far you can take yourself. As we started with some of the steps in now, we've got a couple of minutes left. We'll have a little look at the jaw. This is yet another step which is set further back. This is like the cheekbone. Another thing to consider with the jawbone is it's not flat. You can block in areas. We know right under there it's going to be dark, same here. See if we can turn the board and get it easier from this side. Okay, so I'm keeping my pen inside. Of the jawbone. Now you'll also know with your own face, a jawbone isn't flat, is it? It goes, you know, from back to, as the chin comes along to the front of the chin. So here is like the side bit. I'm touching my face even though you can't see it. This is like side bit near your ear glands. Okay, now turn my board upside down so I keep my heat inside. But that area is going to be further back than this. This is the front of the chin of this jawbone. And in lesson 2 we'll start building on all this start showing together how we make the illusion of depth. We've made a great start today. Feeling out some of the areas that we're looking at. So we've looked at some of the eye sockets, we're looking at the shaping of the skull, the different tiers that are involved. Now always under here as well is another little amazing place. I love on skulls. There's always, where the cheekbone is, there's always this dark patch there. Must be because the cheekbone runs along. So up in the corner is its darkest point. So again, even on the front piece there are tiers. Different levels and probably will be a great deal of this skull that will be left unburnt, or very subtly burnt. What we're reaching now, we're just over the hour, so I'll leave the session there because that was more than enough for you to take in. I hope you learned something today about some of the basic shading techniques and how we're looking at different tiers and levels, excuse me, with the wood burning, how we can show different depths of value. This is just the base work of how we can show more volume, more depth, more shape, just by simply showing different shades of heat. It's going to be a really fun project, and I hope you enjoy it and maybe you have a go at the images yourself and we can burn along together. Okay, so happy pyroing everybody. Have a great Sunday. Keep your fingers crossed for England in the Euros final tonight. Hopefully we're going to win, and it's going to be a sick day for everybody tomorrow. Okay, take care everybody. Thank you very much. Don't forget to leave me a like, hit subscribe if you want to continue with this series, or leave me any comments. You can join the Facebook group, which is Pyrography for Beginners and Beyond by Flames Pyro Art, where we run monthly competitions. We can win some prizes and pyrographer of the month, and we set different themes, you know, for each month, so we can all broaden our skills, and we just all chat about pyrography and, you know, share ideas, share where we get wood, things like that. So you're welcome to join us there. So take care everybody. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you all soon. Bye for now.